Sign up for WynnBET Sportsbook at wynnbet.com today using promo code BlueWire to get up to $1,000 toward a risk-free sports bet. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at wynnbet.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
What is crack-a-lackin', Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale, coming at you once more without my fantabulous co-host, Adam Frommel. I am, however, continuously excited to keep going with our team look-ahead train. We're up to the Detroit Pistons. I'm going to be speaking with Lazarus Jackson. He is an editor for Detroit Bad Boys. He hosts the Detroit Bad Boys podcast. He's also the host of the Pistons versus Everybody podcast under the Blue Wire Network. Follow him on Twitter at Last Chance. It's at LAZCHANCE. We recorded this podcast about a week ago. That's how much of a backlog I have with these episodes. We have also, if anyone wants to know the science behind this, I'm trying to make sure if there are any teams that I'm talking about that could technically do something urgent, like sneak into the Ben Simmons sweepstakes. I've left most of them. They'll probably be until the end of this, but if I've spoken with someone and I think that their team is a little bit of a risk to do something, I have to get them out there just to make sure. The Pistons, I didn't think were a risk to do anything. Not much has changed over the past week. There was the Cade Cunningham ankle injury, but he appears to be fine. This conversation with Laz, though, was absolutely fantastic. He's one of my favorite people in the world to talk hoops with. Also just genuinely a fantastic human being. Has a new son named Chance. We talk about him too. You get his scouting report. Before we dive into the Detroit Pistons, just want to remind, implore, beg, plead everyone to continue rating, reviewing, and subscribing to us wherever you get your podcasts. Whether you use iTunes or not, as long as you have access, we do ask that you head over to iTunes, search Hardwood Knocks, throw us that 5-star rating, write a review. They all help us out a ton. Cannot overstate that. If you have criticism, that is totally fine. Throw us the 5-star rating anyway. Then write up that criticism. We will look at it. And if we need to implement it, we will. You can follow us on Twitter as well at Hardwood Knocks. Follow us on YouTube, search youtube.com, or go to youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks. We will come up. And look, if this is your first time listening because you're a huge Pistons fan, or maybe you're just a huge Lazarus Jackson fan, which I totally, absolutely support. Laz is fantastic. Consider throwing us that permanent subscription, downloading our episodes. We discuss the NBA at large. We are pleasantly sub-mediocre. And in all reality, we aim to be the least sufferable league-wide podcast possible. That's how you got to keep your goals realistic. And that's just where we're at. That's enough of me rambling on. It is late at night as I've recorded this, so I might be a little bit delirious. Let's get into talking about the Detroit Pistons with Lazarus Jackson. Laz, thank you so much for coming back on the Hardwood Knocks podcast. I believe this is your 5th appearance, if my spreadsheet is correct, because I try to make sure I'm not bothering people too many times per year. At this point, as I would say, the first couple of times if you come back, maybe I tricked you, but it's your fault now that you've been on so many times. I do endlessly appreciate your time coming on and talk some Detroit Pistons, but first and foremost, before we get started, how are you?
I'm doing extremely well, Dan. Thank you for having me on for the 5th time. I am glad you're not sick of me at this point.
Please. Love talking hoops with you. I do really have a pressing question, though. Do we have an updated scouting report on Chance?
Okay, so Chance Jackson, approximately 21 inches tall, approximately 12.7 pounds. Wingspan is looking a little rough right now, and his vert's really poor right now. So I'm thinking he's gonna be like a pass first point guard, but like we'll see what he grows into as time goes on.
I guess he has a little bit of time, nigh 2 decades, to grow into his NBA body, but
that's true.
I'm glad to hear he's on the up and up.
We're gonna get there. I gotta order the like little plastic basketball hoop you put in every little boy's room, right?
Are you gonna let him choose his allegiances, or are you just raising him as a flat out Pistons fan?
Oh no, he's gonna be a Pistons fan. Me and my wife is a Michigan fan. I'm a Michigan State fan, and so like we're gonna fight over that to see which she ends up choosing. But she doesn't care about pro sports, so like I get all the pro sports. So he's definitely gonna be a Pistons fan.
I guess that's good for you, but it's also like you're inflicting that heartache on him. It almost feels mean.
Well, it's like I'm not making him be a Lions fan, right? Like there are worse
all
things.
Right. Yeah. That's a good compromise. The Pistons, though, they had an offseason. I'm curious as to, before we sort of get into more of the granular nitty-gritty stuff with them, were there any major thoughts, takeaways, themes, etc. from their offseason that you just are thinking about as we lead into the regular season. And I did put this in parentheticals when I sent you the outline, which since the last time you've come on, I've actually shortened my outlines, even though they're still like 500 words. They used to be double that. If you can explain why Corey Joseph has a player option, I will love you and appreciate you forever until the end of time.
Troy Weaver really, really values relationship building across the NBA, and that is why that's why Corey Joseph has a player option. That's why Blake Griffin is playing in Brooklyn right now. And the Pistons have, if I remember correctly, $39 million worth of dead Blake Griffin money on their cap. That is why they have approximately $4 million worth of dead DeAndre Jordan money on their cap right now. Because Troy Weaver likes doing favors in the hope that like those favors come back around. Well, is that like, I think it's interesting because like we have been so conditioned over the last couple, we as like consumers of NBA Twitter and like fans have been so conditioned to properly appreciate GMs who play like the red paperclip game, where the thing where you like trade a red paperclip for a pen, and you trade the pen for like a frog, and you trade the frog for another thing, and you end up with a house eventually. It's like we've really been like instructed to like value GMs who like treat every transaction with like a lot of meaning and like get the most out of all the assets available to them. And Troy Weaver like just does not like play that game. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. He's a people person. He cares about the people that he's got on his team. And so like he's willing to do stuff like eat, $40 million worth of Blake Griffin in order to get the team he wants. So far so good. It's been 1 year. We'll see where things go. I will be the first to tell you he got a little bit lucky with the plan by getting the number 1 overall pick, right? Like that is yeah, all the plans look great if you just like get the number 1 pick in a year when it's a good year to get the number 1 pick. But so far, like things look like they're on the way up in Detroit.
The thing that I think surprised me most about their offseason was the Sekou trade. And I'm wondering if that surprised you at all. And I think you were pretty vocal during the season. And even in the most recent pod you recorded about how you don't really see what Sekou is an expert in. And I think I would have gotten the move more if there was like a next prospect up type deal. But where are those minutes? Like, is it Trey Lyles? Like that was the alternative. It's been framed that way on Twitter. You talked about it a little bit. How did you feel about that decision?
I wasn't surprised or disappointed, especially after the summer league Sekou had, right? I think he made like only 1 3 in like 4 games and looked to be really improving defensively. But at the same time, like his offensive role was like, he's always just been a guy who cuts into space and runs down the floor in transition. And that's really all you can count on him to do offensively. And it doesn't seem like that was enough for Troy Weaver. It was funny. Troy Weaver had a line during media day, the Pistons media day, which was Monday. He said, if there were 10 players on the roster I really liked, I would have stayed. They would have stayed. So it's like, obviously he's turned over literally the entire roster. Sekou was the last guy he inherited when he was hired as GM. He turned over literally the entire roster in a year. And it's plainly because he didn't like any of the dudes on the roster that much. And so it's like Sekou is just another casualty of not being, under Troy Weaver's favor. Now, like, as your point about like who gets to like replace him though is like very much well taken. It's like, is that Trey Lyles? Like, God, I hope not. I'm not a big Trey Lyles dude. But you look at some of the other guys.
Is there a big Trey Lyles dude aside from someone related to Trey Lyles though?
I was like, Trey Lyles has a pretty high opinion of himself from what I hear. So yes. But like there are other, you look at the guys they put in on the 2 ways, right? You look at like Chris Smith and Jamarco Pickett. It's like what Jamarco Pickett did in Summer League is like basically what I think they wanted Sekou to do. And so it's like, if we can get that guy in a 2-way and we don't have to worry about, the team option on Sekou's 4th year, and we can do the Brooklyn Nets a favor and, get 4 second-round picks, which makes up for the 4 second-round picks we sent out in Luke Kennard deal. Like everything turns out in the wash, right? And so it's like, yeah, it wasn't surprising. And it wasn't even really that disappointing, which I guess is disappointing in and of itself. I had such high hopes for Sekou when he was initially drafted.
Yeah, I think we could probably go back to a podcast that you and I recorded where you waxed poetic about Sekou. So
Yeah.
it's wild how things can change so quickly. Their biggest, I guess, transaction of the summer was shockingly keeping the number one pick and drafting Cade Cunningham. I know that caught everybody off guard, but going into the season, are there any impressions that you have about his game, maybe after watching him in summer league? I think my main question is though, do we have any idea of how much license he's immediately going to have over Detroit's offense?
That's a good question. I don't think he's going to be the guy like out of the gate. I think it takes like 30, 35 games, right? It's definitely going to happen eventually. But like Jeremy Grant, again, like Troy Weaver's like handpicked dude from high school with Victor Oladipo in the DMV area. Like, I think Jeremy Grant is still going to be like the number one option on this team for the first 30 games. And then as Cade gets more comfortable, as the team, probably doesn't win that much and gets okay with losing in the service of throwing things at Cade and like seeing what sticks and seeing what he's able to accomplish and not able to accomplish. Same thing for a lot of the other young dudes on the roster. I think like they enter like a timeshare, a 1A, 1B situation. And I think that'll be good for both guys. Like you put this in the outline, right? But like Jeremy Grant really kind of wore down as a primary guy as the year went on after a really strong start. And so I think having another guy who can operate as a primary ball handler in Cade will be good for Jeremy. Cade, it's so funny, man. Cade makes everybody's life so much easier. Just like by the simple fact of existing. It was so apparent like so many times last year. The Pistons just needed like another dude who could get a bucket. And Cade can do that. And he can also like get other guys buckets, which is like a miracle. They've been like praying for a dude like that for so long. And so like, yeah, it's gonna be great. The thing that's like stood out to me though about Cade and what the team has been saying and what other people have been saying about him is like his maturity, right? Everybody thinks of him as like this really like well-grounded 20-year-old. He just turned 20. Mm-hmm. And so like that is what I'm really interested to see, because you see a lot of like young dudes, they come into the league, they were the best player in their state, they were the best player in their conference, they were a top 5 pick, and then you hit the NBA and all of a sudden like you're the 220th best player in the league. And a lot of guys, that's a big shock for them. For Cade is like, I think because of his maturity, he's more equipped to handle and like process that shock than other rookies you might see. And I think that's going to be huge for him, especially as we get down like to the game, 62 against Sacramento on the third night, or the third game of a six game road trip out west. And you're just like, I'm tired, I want to go home. But like Cade's got the mentality where it's like, no, like we're gonna bring it tonight. And like that's the thing that I think like really impresses me the most about him.
The other thing that I liked, and so many of my impressions of Cade are just based off summer league because I only go like shin deep into the draft, was you sort of mentioned how maybe he won't have that primary role for almost half the season or as he grows into it. I think in some cases there could be certain players where if you come in, they might have a tough time kind of adapting to not being that alpha. And it felt like his game could be, I don't want to go as far as plug and play, but like it felt like he wouldn't have that much of an issue not being the guy for points. He was stepping into catch and shoot jumpers that felt like second nature or it looked like second nature to him. And then even I'm just wondering, like, maybe Detroit doesn't necessarily have the requisite other passers around him, but if they got him moving off the ball even more, like ducking in for in open lanes, especially since they have so many more shooters on the roster, it just feels like he could have a really big impact as someone offensively, as someone who is not your primary ball handler.
Yeah. And like in that same vein, right? Per summer league, it doesn't look like he'll be rock bottom terrible on defense either, which is also like a really big reason why rookies struggle in the NBA. They're like constantly getting cooked, and that's hard on your mental. But it seems like Cade is involved and engaged, and then like communicating on the defensive end in a way that we like don't typically see from rookies. And so I also think like that's just like one more thing that like elevates the floor on him.
Slow is just right if you're on vacation, a sloth, or describing QuickBooks. More like slow books. It sucks you in and slows you down with manual processes, integration difficulties, and glitchy delays that leave you scrambling for the numbers you need. Now is the time to make the switch to NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 financial system, because NetSuite gives you visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, e-commerce, and more. It's everything you need to grow, all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time, no matter how big your business grows. Failing to switch to NetSuite will leave you stuck trying to make sense of your books while your competitors sprint ahead. 93% of surveyed businesses increased visibility and control since switching to NetSuite. And right now, special financing is back. NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financial program only for those ready to switch today. Head to netsuite.com/bluewire right now. Get special financing at netsuite.com/bluewire. One more time, netsuite.com/bluewire.
No team can afford to overpay for talent. Build a championship team with Indeed the smart way by only paying for quality candidates that meet your must-have requirements. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/bluewire. When hiring gets hard, you need Indeed, the job site that makes hiring incredibly simple. Just attract, interview, and hire. In fact, with Indeed, you can do all of your hiring in one place, even interviewing. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/bluewire. Indeed knows how important it is to make the most of your recruiting hours and dollars. With Indeed, you can save time and money by setting your must-have qualifications and only paying for the quality candidates that meet them. Indeed.com/bluewire. Offer valid through October 31st. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's go to Jeremy Grant, that you had mentioned him already. Do you think this roster is just now better suited to maximize him? I guess you mentioned that he'll enter being the #1 option again. And I destroyed him for taking the same money that the Pistons were offering him in search of a larger role, because I just assumed that he didn't have like more layers or the ability to really broaden his offensive skill set. And to his credit, he did. Like, even though he faded down the stretch of the season, I don't think we ever envisioned him taking, or I never envisioned him taking as many pull-up jumpers or working in isolation as much. And it just, sort of working. But now you have Cade next to him. Maybe if Killian Hayes is fully healthy, it does feel like they've opened up the floor around him. And so I don't know whether it's reasonable to expect him to replicate what he did last year, but it does feel like when this roster really comes together, if it's midseason and Cade is in his bag, that if he's able to be nudged down to like the #2 for points, that this could be a big year for him, or that could be the role for which he's actually best suited.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Jeremy was so impressive last year as a scorer, as a guy who got to the line as much as he did. That was the thing that like really drove the point home for me. Is he was getting to the line like 7-8 times a game, which is just like something we hadn't had in Detroit out of a primary ball handler in a long time. But at the same time, Jeremy Grant was most efficient and more confident when the Pistons had Blake Griffin, and when teams were inexplicably still like double teaming Blake like he was Blake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when Blake left, when Derrick Rose left, or when Blake left and Derrick Rose was traded, I should be more honest. Just so much of the creation burden night in and night out fell on Jeremy's shoulders, and he has talked openly about how that was a really hard burden for him to carry, and something he had never done before in his NBA careers. And despite being a 7-year vet, an 8-year vet, now it's like he was like living an entirely different NBA experience than what he was used to. And so I am also hopeful that like Cade is able to like unshoulder some of that burden for him. I'm hopeful that Killian is able to unshoulder some of that. We'll see if that ends up happening. But at the same time, like, I think Jeremy, like we still have like layers to see. We still got to peel back some more layers on like the Jeremy Grant onion, right? Mm-hmm. If he can maintain the production he was showing off earlier in the year, getting to the free throw line as much. I think with Cade, there's a chance you can get better percentages from three out of him. He was much better as a catch and shoot 3-point shooter than an off the dribble 3-point shooter. And so you can get him more catch and shoot looks with Cade, and like that'll make him more efficient. It's like, yeah, I think, and he really, and the amount of energy he had to expend on offense really impacted his defense. He was a good defensive player earlier in the year, and that kind of waned as the season went on. And so you would like to see him be able to engage on both ends meaningfully, like throughout the entirety of the season. But like then again, like if the Pistons are bad, if the Pistons are 15-30 after 45 games, like I doubt you see Jeremy Grant like finish out the year, and just like he didn't really finish out the year last year.
You mentioned Killian Hayes. Aside from like the gather step 3 he hit against the Knicks in Vegas or whatever that was, Twitter was not kind to him during summer league.
No, yeah.
They were not really kind to him during the regular season.
No.
I actually wrote something very miniature about Killian Hayes in the offseason, and just watching him, I still like him. Like it feels like when he gets into the lane that defenses react, and it feels like there's a better decision maker, better shooter, just better player in there than what we've seen. How do you feel? What are you looking to see from him in year 2? What are your general thoughts on him after what you saw last year, which by the way was a rookie season that was derailed a large part of it by his right hip issue?
Yeah, I remain optimistic on Killian, but I do think it's good that Cade is here because Cade is a better prospect than Killian, and so you don't necessarily have to worry if Killian doesn't work. It's not crippling in the way it would be if you picked 5th this year and ended up with like who went 5th?
That was
Scotty Barnes. No, not Scotty Barnes.
No, Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, if you ended up with like Jonathan Kuminga, right? It's not nearly as crippling to the team as ending up with Cade. But like with that said, the thing people always like wonder is like if Cade and Killian will fit together. What was really funny to me in Vegas is like, again, I'm watching these Vegas games like in isolation, like not on social media, like not really seeing what people are saying. It's like I just got like chance in my lap and like I got the game on, and like that's how I'm trying to process all this stuff. So like when I look at what other people said later, it's like a lot of people. So I looked at like Mike Schmitz and like Sam Vecini, for example, were like all up in arms that like Killian had the ball too much, Cade like wasn't initiating the offense enough, and that like that was what makes Cade special is his ability to create shots for others. He didn't get the chance to do that with Killian dribbling the air out of the ball, and like the Pistons are going to have to bench Killian Hayes eventually, which was like not like Killian statistically didn't have a great summer league, so like I can't say like that's completely wrong. But like what I noticed was that Killian was the only guy in Vegas who made an effort to make Cade's life any easier, right? Like the Pistons didn't really have any amazing like pick and roll partners for Cade. They eventually like Luka Garza was inserted into the starting lineup, and like that partnership worked well, but it took him 2 games to figure that out. 2 out of like he only played 3 games, right? And so what I saw was like Killian is the dude like getting Cade open catch and shoot triples, right? Killian is the dude in the New York game like getting the offensive rebound, kicking it to a wide open Cade in the corner, and Cade is like knocking down his like 7th or 8th 3, right? And so I think we talked about like with Cade his ability to make his teammates better, but also like the ability for like what he needs is other people to make things easy on him, especially like as he goes into the league for the first time. And I think Killian can do that. You think about like Cade gets compared to Luka Doncic a lot, right? You got compared a lot to Luka Doncic in the pre-draft process. Luka is a better player than Cade. He's a better prospect than Cade at that age. But like Luka's all-NBA MVP candidate, like ridiculous player. But you think about what Dallas has been looking for next to Luka for a long time, and it's another guard who can take some of the ball handling duties out of his hands, so he doesn't have to do it for 48 minutes, right? They've gone through like Jalen Brunson, Seth Curry, Trey Burke, our old friend DeLon Wright. They drafted Tyrell Terry. Like they've been looking for a dude to like take the ball out of Luka's hands, so that Luka has like more energy to do stuff like when it counts. Like I think Killian can be that type of player for Cade, and I think having that type of player around at the outset of his career makes Cade a better player now and in the future.
I like it, the optimism. I still believe in him. And I was going to, I'd asked you about the fit in the outline. So I'm glad that you think that there's like a pathway to actually making it work. And I think if Cade is going to play the way he did in summer league, or at least kind of have the moments where he was shooting like off the catch the way he did, I don't know if you would call it seamless, but it does feel like this shouldn't be an overcomplicated fit. And it's not like Jeremy Grant isn't used to working without the ball either. So you're not really trying to sandwich three guys with overlapping proclivities together.
Right. It's like, okay. It's like you ask like any NBA coach, it's like, okay, I have a 6'5" playmaker and I have a 6'7" playmaker. Like, how do I make those guys like work together? And the coach just like stared at you blankly, like, what are you talking about? Like, those guys should fit together just fine. And it's like, yeah, they should. Well, it just remains to be seen if Killian like can put the ball in the basket more often.
He did shoot upon returning from his right hip issue 47.4% from 10 to 14 feet. That is what I'm latching onto. And if you want to know why I was scrolling through the data, I was writing something about him and I needed to cherry pick something positive for him from the semi perimeter. And that's what I ended up with.
He gets to that area quite nicely as well.
I feel like I've probably said this already 10 times. I'll say it 10 times more, but among the things that surprised me with the Pistons, and so many things surprised me about them last year, I found them pleasantly watchable and I thought they were going to be awful. We'll get to Isaiah Stewart in a second. I mean, they were top 10 in crunch time minutes played before the All-Star break. They weren't winning, but they were in more competitive games than people were crediting them for. Saddiq Bey might have been the biggest surprise to me. Just a much quicker decision maker on offense, and there were more ball skills there. Not where I would be like, okay, let's put him in isolation again and again, but he just has some like spins and misdirections, and no, it's not always clean, but I just never viewed him as that type of player. And he seems so willing to get up threes on offense. Just like there was real volume there. Do you think the Pistons are going to try and plumb more of his offensive depth, or does the addition of Cade and a healthy Killian kind of shoehorn him into more of that accessory duty now?
I think they'll try. You kind of have to try, right? They tried it a little bit in Vegas in summer league. It didn't go amazingly. It went fine.
I go back and forth on that, by the way, because I always like Desmond Bane in Memphis getting to run all these pick and rolls. I'm like, they need to try that. But then I'm like, all right, well, look at the rest of the summer league roster. This is why Desmond Bane is running all these pick and rolls.
Right. It's like, it's like, if there's anything there, if there's any there at all, right, that makes Saddiq a much more valuable player if he can shoulder even like a little bit of creation stuff from Cade, from Jeremy, from Killian. That's so useful that you want to see if you can do it or not. And ultimately, I don't think there will be like a ton of that stuff this year. Physically, Saddiq is more of like a bully ball, like kind of bull you over, post you up, like spin around you, and one type of guy, rather than like a guy who's going to like move on the catch, like take two dribbles and kind of like glide to the rim and finish over somebody. So like physically he's like a little bit limited in what he can do as far as like an off-ball guy. But like we've seen like not amazing NBA athletes still end up being like good creation guys. I'm thinking of like Chris Middleton and like DeMar DeRozan through pure like skill and touch. And I think Saddiq has an opportunity to get to like some of that stuff. I like Saddiq a lot. I don't think the addition of like Cade like puts any kind of like limit on his game. I think he's just gonna do like what he's asked to do and like what he thinks the team like needs to do for him, for what the team needs of him in order to win. And for now, that's gonna involve like a lot of like catch and shoot threes. But like I hope it's an area of his game he ends up developing, just because like I said, if there's any there, it's so valuable. But yeah, Saddiq's really good.
Are they going to test him? I know they have Jeremy Grant here, and I also know he was a rookie that season, so I'm trying not to read anything, but are they going to test him a little bit more defensively? Because I was just kind of surprised, like when you look at a lot of the matchup stuff he did last year, it didn't feel like he was baptized by fire or thrown to the wolves as often as I thought that he would on a team like Detroit.
They put him in position to succeed a lot. he's not like some like on ball stopper. He has trouble with like smaller, quicker dudes. And so I think how you get the most out of him on that end is you continue to like put him on bigger wings, and maybe the answer could even be like sliding him up to 4 and seeing like him leverage that like strength with that athleticism, like against guys cutting the basket against some like bigger wings as a rebounder. He was an okay rebounder, not an amazing rebounder, but he has great rebounding technique, but like so often he was on the perimeter and like not able to use it. So I think that there's a chance you see him like slide up in some lineups and get better use out of like his skills on defense that way.
When we recorded this podcast last season or before last season, I'm pretty sure I dumped all over Isaiah Stewart. I just was not high on him as an NBA prospect. He moved so well on defense. He impressed the hell out of me. They experimented with him taking shots from 3. Pistons fans in Hardwood Knox's YouTube section have claimed that he is going to be an all-star one day. Is he going to start this year following the departure of Mason Plumlee? And what are you sort of looking to see from him this season as a sophomore?
So to be fair to you, I was also not super impressed with the Isaiah Stewart selection, and he just like immediately like outstripped all of my expectations for him. And so like, yeah, do I think he's gonna be an all-star someday? Like probably not.
I thought you were gonna go with probably and just stop. I was like, wow.
Does that make me a bad Pistons fan if I think that like
it always surprises me, like even in YouTube comment sections, who people cape for. And it was just, I thought we were high on Isaiah Stewart in the middle of the season, but it turns out we weren't high enough.
Well, it's like, if you ask Pistons fans, right? Like they've got have you seen the creation of Isaiah Stewart? So, the Da Vinci photo, the creation of man, right? The picture of like God reaching out, touching Adam, and Adam like reaching out, touching God.
Yes.
Yeah. So they made that with Isaiah Stewart and Ben Wallace. That's what Pistons fans think of Isaiah Stewart, right? It's like they think like this is 2020 Ben Wallace just like beating dudes up, blocking shots around the rim, and shooting threes. Ben Wallace with threes. That's Isaiah Stewart. Pistons fans love Isaiah Stewart, man. Do I think Isaiah Stewart's Ben Wallace with threes? I don't. I'm encouraged though that Ben Wallace is like apparently hanging around the team and like willing to mentor Isaiah. That's really cool. He was at training camp today. It's like and he's going to be around more often. It's like that's dope.
Are we sure Isaiah's not mentoring him? That's how good Isaiah Stewart might be.
But like the thing I want from Isaiah in year 2 is to be more assertive offensively. Like, do I want him to score like 20 points a night? No. But do I want him to take like 9 shots a night instead of 6? Like, yeah. You saw late in the season, they started using him as like a pick and pop threat more. Anybody like national who is like, wait, what? Like Isaiah Stewart was shooting threes. Like, go watch the late season game against Dallas, right? Kristaps Porzingis, Boban Marjanovic, Dwight Powell, like none of those guys wanted to like leave the paint and guard Isaiah Stewart on the perimeter, and he hit like 3 threes, and people were like losing their minds on Twitter. But the thing with Isaiah that you saw as they started doing that more was that if his like footwork wasn't absolutely pristine, like he wouldn't shoot, right? Even if he was wide open, if he like wasn't able to get, if he hadn't done it the way he'd repped it out in practice, he like couldn't do it. And like what I want from him is like see him like try to do it, even if it's not like completely perfect. He's got to let it fly a little bit more.
I mean, I think a majority of his threes, they were coming from above the break too. So
Yeah.
and I guess those are like the typical pick and pop situations, but if he's going to be able to up the volume, but even if he stays around the 33% or whatever it was, and it's just more volume, that does a lot to open up the floor still at the center position. I think that's a number where opposing centers would be forced to guard him.
Yeah. And like that, and the Pistons have really prioritized shooting this offseason in a way that they hope opens up like driving lanes for Cade and Killian. Again, guys who are like good NBA athletes, but not elite level NBA athletes. But like even Even like Caden Killian can get to the rim and score if your big has to leave the paint to worry about Isaiah Stewart on the pick and pop, right?
The other thing about Isaiah Stewart too, and this was the thing I thought I was going to be lowest on, is he feels like, I know people, we seem like the block highlights, but he just covers or can cover so much ground in the pick and roll where he's a real deterrent. Like, it's not just shot blocking. It's like he's kind of mucking up possessions before they ever reach the rim and just becomes like this functional rim protector through that way. And so I looked this up, and I'm sure it's a stat that you might already know. And if you don't, maybe you hate it, but the Pistons opponents took 5.2% fewer of their shots came at the rim with Isaiah Stewart on the floor. That's the second highest mark among everyone who logged at least 1,000 minutes last year, and only Rudy Gobert was in front of him. So the opponent frequency with which they attempted shots at the rim dropped by 5.2% with Stewart on the floor. And watching it, it's like, no, I don't think he's the next Rudy Gobert. But watching the way he can kind of play on defense, and which is something I clearly just never saw before, he actually took the floor for the NBA. That feels like accurate, that he was impacting the game in that type of way.
Yeah, I didn't know that exact statistic like that. That's cool.
Me stammering through it probably didn't help. But
no. I get you, but you're right in that. Because he's not like 6'10", or because he's not like 7 feet tall, and he doesn't have like an 8-foot wingspan or whatever, it's people don't think of Isaiah Stewart as like a rim protector or an amazing defender, but he does have a really like wide wingspan for his height. I believe he's listed at 6'9", and I think his wingspan is like 7'4", so he's got like a plus 6 or 7 wingspan, and his hands are huge and real strong. And so like you could see times where it's like, if he gets his hands, if he's like swiping as he retreats on the pick and roll, like that makes an impact on guards, because they're like, oh crap, like he could definitely bust up me trying to snake this pick and roll. And so they have to take that into account. So that statistic does not surprise me. It surprises me like it's at that level, but like, yeah, I would have believed it. Also, like Mason Plumlee was not an amazing rim protector for the Pistons last year. They might have something to do with it as well.
I mean, Mason Plumlee is just not a good rim protector in general, I don't think.
Yeah.
Apologies if you answered this already, but I'm assuming, I know they signed Kelly Olynyk, but getting rid of Mason Plumlee, I would think sort of implies that Stewart will start if his ankle is good. And do you expect him and Olynyk to log time together?
Yeah. Yes, I expect Stewart to start. If not immediately, then like eventually, like within the first, if not like game one, within the first 10 games, right? And Dwayne Casey did say during media day that he expects that there will be some Canadian beef stew lineups available for the Pistons. They will play Olynyk and Stewart together. I'm interested to see how those lineups go. I hope they choose not to lean on those lineups, just because like those are really the only two centers on the roster. I don't think Luka Garza is ready to play in the NBA like right now. And like I don't want to play Trey Lyles at 5 under any circumstance. And so putting both of your centers on the floor at the same time doesn't sound like an amazing move to me, but I get why they want to do it, just to see if Isaiah Stewart can cover 4s, basically.
Shoehorning 3 players together just because the Pistons have so many just like odds and ends to tie up. Who's more important to this team, Saban Lee, Josh Jackson, or Hamidou Diallo? And as I mentioned in the outline, I try to admit when I just don't have a feel for anything or a player, if I really just don't know something, and maybe I haven't watched enough of Hamidou Diallo, I do not understand what he brings offensively, just in general. So if you can explain that to me.
Well, no, you were right. You had it right in the outline. It's rim pressure.
It just doesn't look, it doesn't aesthetically please me, I guess.
That's totally fair. But the athletic dimension that Hami offers in the half court is something that the Pistons like don't have elsewhere on the roster, right? Like Jeremy Grant is probably the only other guy who can like bend a defense like that in the half court, like simply because like he's driving, and Jeremy Grant draws a lot more defensive attention than Hamidou Diallo does,
right?
for obvious reasons. If like it's like I do think Hami is the most important out of those 3 dudes. If I think like there was a real chance if the Pistons ended up with like Evan Mobley instead of Cade Cunningham, I think there's a real chance Hamidou could have been like the day one starter at shooting guard. And like Troy Weaver obviously likes him, liked him in Oklahoma City enough to take him, liked him enough in Detroit to trade for him at a relatively low cost. Svi caught on in Toronto. That's right. That was
I still believe.
Yeah, I like Svi. Svi was nice. It would have been nice to have a guy who made threes as much as Svi did 2 years ago, not last year. Last year he was terrible. So you understand why they made the trade. But yeah, Hami's so athletic, and nobody can, if he gets like any sort of advantage in the half court, nobody can stay in front of him. And between Cade and Killian, you have guys who create advantages for their teammates for a living. And so the thought process there is just like, run a pick and roll, pass it to Hami on the weak side. He's got like an advantage. He drives to the basket and just like creates pressure that like otherwise wouldn't exist. I like Josh Jackson. I like Josh Jackson a lot. I love Josh Jackson in college. He still should have been a Spartan. He talked openly at media day about how like important and cool it was for him to be back home, to be playing for the Detroit Pistons, something he like thought about since he was a kid. And so like I think it's really cool that Josh Jackson's on the team, and I hope he stays around. But at this point, it's pretty clear that like he's just a guy, right? Like the league below league average 3-point percentage over the last 4 years, just like that just pigeonholes him into being like just a guy territory. And Saban's really interesting. Saban had a really good summer league when like Killian did not. And so like, and there were spots last year where Saban played like really well against like legitimate NBA competition. And so like you could be forgiven for being like why did they re-sign Corey Joseph when like Saban Lee is standing right there? But I think that they think that Saban's like not quite ready for prime time just yet. The shot is a work in progress. You saw in Vegas he was like trying a bunch of like off the dribble threes. It didn't always go in. He had like the game against the Lakers, he was like firing away and they were hitting, and that opened up everything, and you saw why he's trying them, right? Because if people have to jump out on screens on him, he's going to yam on somebody. But at the same time, like that's something that needs to be developed over the course of like another season in the G League. And so I don't think Saban plays like a major role for the Pistons this year, but they liked him enough to sign him to like a real NBA contract. He's no longer on a two-way, and I do think that they think of him as like a very important developmental piece for them moving forward.
I think I might like him the best of these three, to be honest with you. Just looking at
I mean that's not wrong.
If he could finish better around the rim, because he does put that rim pressure, and when I was looking, he got to the line at a higher clip than I thought. So if he can, turn into just like like an operable 3-point shooter where you can count on him for more than one attempt per 36 minutes, he would just intrigue me a lot more. Like, as I told you, I either am out on Hamidou Diallo or I don't even know who he is, I guess. And then I'm in agreement with you that Josh Jackson feels like just a guy. I guess their roster, though, when you look at sort of the front court depth, it is built to get a little weird. So do we see Josh Jackson play like some real minutes at the 4 this year? Just they run out of actual bigs pretty quickly.
Very quickly. Yeah. I mean, I think he said in the past he doesn't want to do that. I don't know if that matters or not, but I don't think it's something that like he feels comfortable doing, and I don't think the team will ask that of him. But I think it's something he could do in a pinch. But yeah. No, and the other thing about Saban is his playmaking, right? With as hard and as fast as he drives, he's still able to like use pace. He really impressed me with the way that he was like able to leverage the threat of his speed and like play make for others. And he did that in the NBA and he did that in summer league. And so like there's a lot to like with Saban Lee. You're not wrong to think like he might be the most intriguing out of those guys. It's just like James Edwards III at The Athletic, the beat writer for the Pistons for The Athletic, he's I don't know, he would not say he's a big fan of Hamidou Diallo because you're not allowed to be fans of anybody for the team you cover, but he thinks Hami has like a real path to stardom if he ever gets the shot together. And it is kind of easy. It's easier to see, like, if you have Saban and Tommy, like two guys who are not known for their ability to shoot. But if they both ever learn to shoot, you do kind of see how Tommy would be better than Saban.
I guess so much of what Hami could be just feels too theoretical. And since Saban Lee's been in the league not as long, I just tend to favor him. And there's also, I still think he feel like this not weird. It was an awesome wraparound pass to Beef Stew in one game. Like you said, he's driving so hard. And there can be defensive overreaction, but the fact that he's able to make a play like that's like one of the flashbulb moments that I remember of watching from him this season. In my quest to just combine players to cover as much ground as possible here, who intrigues you more for the Pistons long term among Luka Garza, Cassius Stanley, or Jamarco Pickett?
None of those answers are correct. The answer is Chris Smith. Chris Smith is the answer we were looking for. Chris Smith is the kid out of UCLA, undrafted free agent they have in a two-way. He tore his ACL in January, but prior to that, people had first-round grades on Chris Smith. 6'9" wing, rapidly improving three-point shooter, was getting asked to do like a little bit more with the ball in his hands, and I thought like that with positive returns so far in college, like prior to the injury. And so I think there's a ton of upside there with Chris Smith, and I'm really curious to see what he looks like. He's not ready yet. When he spoke during media day, like he's still in rehab. Or he's still rehabbing the injury. Sorry, that sounds way worse than it actually is. But so he tore the ACL in January, which means you'll probably see him back for the cruise in like January sometime. I think I'm really intrigued by Chris Smith. I am also probably the only Pistons person you could have invited on the podcast that would not say Luka Garza. Pistons fans super duper love them some Luka Garza, and Luka Garza, made second team all Vegas. What do you call the summer league? All NBA teams, all rookie teams. I don't know.
I think is it just all summer league teams? I don't think it's anything fancy. And clearly that honor is telltale of what's going to happen next.
He was very productive offensively, and still limited defensively in a way that gives me huge pause for a big man having any kind of success at the NBA level. But because he's a big man who strokes threes and is fiery, and his dad is really active on Twitter, like Pistons fans, no, seriously, like Pistons fans have been really engaging with Luka Garza's dad on Twitter. It's awesome. But like Pistons fans love the guy, and so I'm willing to see what he's got. I just remain like I've seen players like Luka Garza fail in the NBA so often that like I don't know if Luka Garza is like that 1 in a million dude. But I'm totally willing to give him the chance, though. Like, he works his butt off. The summer league thing was he lost 30 pounds in preparation for playing in the NBA to, cover more ground. And it kind of seemed like that sometimes it was like working, but like, again, it's summer league. And like when you get to actual NBA competition, even actual like bench players like, in the NBA are much better than the competition you face in summer league. And so like, I just remain doubtful. So if you're just like squeezing together like all the dudes the Pistons have in the two ways and the guys that took in the second round, Chris Smith is the one with the most upside for me.
What is the lowdown on Isaiah Livers? He has 2 guaranteed years, I believe. Am I wrong? And so do they just really trust that once he's healthy, his shooting is going to translate?
I think so. Yeah, he was an elite level college catch and shoot 3-point shooter. And so like I think there's a huge potential for like a thoroughly unremarkable 10-year NBA career for Isaiah Livers, right? Isaiah Livers has enormous Tony Snell energy.
Ooh. Except maybe he'll actually shoot it. It feels like Tony Snell is so low volume.
That's true. Yeah. Except he'll actually shoot it.
We've reached the cookie cutter portion of the podcast, which are the staple questions I ask on every single preview. I know this is a question that's always loaded because things will change as the season goes on, but leading into the year, who would you bill as the player most likely to get traded from this team before the deadline?
See, this question is cookie cutter for most teams, right? Because most teams like have a dude who's underperformed for a while that fans expect to be gone. The Pistons have traded everybody and brought in a whole new roster over the last 12 months. And so, like, I don't know, man. A lot of these dudes could get traded. I think if you look at the roster, the guy that makes the most sense to me is Frank Jackson, a guy who we haven't really talked about yet, however long we are into the podcast, but who had a really good season for the Pistons last year, in a different role than I think he was billed as previously in his career. He turned himself, like, he was billed as a point guard, right? They tried him as a point guard, that didn't work. So he turned himself into a Langston Galloway clone, and that worked much, much better for Frank and for the Pistons. He only makes $3 million a year. Lots of teams could use a Langston Galloway clone for $3 million a year. And so, like, yeah, you could definitely see Frank getting traded, and like nothing being bad about that. Just like, Hami's playing over him, Cade's playing over him, Killian and Cade and Kojo are all in the backcourt, and just like Frank's not getting any minutes, and another team could use the scoring, right? Like, nothing wrong with Frank. It's just like it's NBA business.
Yeah, I mean, they're like not really built for a trade. Their highest paid player is Blake Griffin's dead money, and then their fifth highest paid player is Killian Hayes at $5.6 million. I would have went with Josh Jackson just because of the expiring contract, and maybe he has an outlier season from three, or continues to show a little bit more discipline on defense. And if they don't view him as like a long-term keeper with this team, when you have